Yes, this is Psychicworldnet. John G. Sutton. I'm going to talk today about the ghost of Louisa Merrifield. Louisa Merrifield, otherwise known as the Blackpool Poisoner. She was operating in the 1950s when she was the live-in housekeeper, and assistant for a lady called Mrs. Ricketts in Blackpool. Now, Mrs. Ricketts had a strange eating habit that she would consume jars of strawberry jam with a spoon, and she would wash these down with rum or strong ale, and she owned a bungalow, and she had quite a bit of money because she'd been left money by her late husband. And what happened was she was persuaded by Mrs. Merrifield to change her will and make her a beneficiary. And once she'd done that, Mrs. Merrifield went to the local chemist and purchased some rat poison, which she subsequently mixed in to the jam that Mrs. Ricketts was eating. Subsequently, Mrs. Ricketts died, and as Mrs. Merrifield was a bit of a boozer, shall we say, she was boasting about this to strangers who, when they read in the paper that Mrs. Ricketts had died, reported it to the police. And Mrs. Merrifield was arrested, put on trial in 1953 at Manchester Assizes, or what we now know today as the Crown Court, and she was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. She was subsequently hanged by the neck until she was dead by the hangman of the day, Albert Pierrepoint. And the place where she was hung was Strangeways Jail. Now, go forward a few decades, and it was 1981, and I was a hospital officer in Strangeways Prison. That's a prison officer who is qualified as a nurse. So I was acting, well, I wasn't acting, I actually was a nurse, taking care of patients and inmates with problems in the prison, and medical problems, of course. And it was a particular lunchtime, and I was in charge of I1, which was the medical landing in the postal allocation unit at Strangeways. And it was lunchtime, and I was in charge whilst everybody else went for the lunch. I had an hour and a half when I was the sole hospital officer in charge of the clinic and the inmates in cellular accommodation at Strangeways in the postal allocation unit. And it would be probably about 1:45 in the afternoon, and I was in the office, and I heard this bang, 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 banging on the door of a cell on I2, which was part of the hospital. So I went to this cell, and as I was approaching the cell, I saw this like a dark shadow, and it was just slowly moving on. It was quite a wide shadow, you know, and but it was very black and cold, and it just disappeared as I approached. It moved past me and disappeared, and I went to the cell where the inmate was still banging on his door. I said, "Come on, calm down, what's the problem?" I had keys, of course, so I opened him up and had a word with him. He said, "There's been a woman in my cell a woman in my cell. She's big and she's small and she's... I said, there's no women in here, lad. You know, calm him down, as you do. Well, do your best anyway. So he went on to describe this lady, and I said, you can be assured there is no females in this prison. It's a male prison. There's only me and thee at the moment, right here, and I'm going to lock you back up and you'll be perfectly okay. Well, he calmed down a bit and I locked him up. But anyway, I was a bit perturbed about this. So I spoke to the principal officer who was in charge of the entire unit, and I said, there's a strange occurrence there. There's a young man banging on his cell saying that he's seen a woman enter his cell. And I said, of course there are no women, so I told him he was imagining it. I said, but as I was approaching the cell, I saw this strange shadow appear, and it was freezing cold around it. Oh, he said, you've seen Mrs. Merrifield. He said, she frequently appears. I said, oh, really? And that's when he told me the story about Mrs. Merrifield being the Blackpool poisoner who was hung in Strangeways Jail in November of 1953. Well, Mrs. Merrifield has obviously not made the transition between this material world and the next, because she still is walking the landings of Strangeways Jail. And the cell where the young man was banging on the door, that was the cell that was occupied by Mrs. Merrifield immediately before she was taken to the condemned unit in the main prison and hanged by Albert Pierrepoint. This is Psychicworldnet. If you look down below, there's a link to my new website. Do please have a look. And if you'd like a consultation, there are a choice of psychics on the website, some details and various links. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this little psychic insight into the hauntings of Strangeways Jail.